guys, it's Claire. Welcome back. And if you're here for the first time, welcome. Today I'm bringing you my September reading wrap-up. So let's get started. The first book I read in September was Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. I read Celeste Ng's Everything I Never Told You last summer, and I really liked it and was really anticipating this book and was excited about it. And I ended up being really disappointed by it. If you want to know more about my thoughts on this book, I'm going to link my full review for it down below. Suffice it to say, it was not my favorite. The next book I read was Love Thy Neighbor, A Story of War by Peter Maass. I also did a full review on this book, which you can also check out down below. And like I said in that review, this is one of the best books I've read so far this year. It covers the year that Peter Maass spent covering the Bosnian War from 1992 to 1993. When he was a journalist for the Washington Post. I have been trying to read a little bit more about Bosnia and the Bosnian War in the last year or so because my landlords are from Bosnia and came here because of the war. So I've been trying to become a little bit more informed about this area of history. And I think that makes it sound like this book is only for people who are specifically interested in Bosnia or Yugoslavia or the Balkans, but it really is extremely accessible and can be read by anyone regardless of your knowledge of that region or the history of that region. I really think it is an uncompromising look at the weaknesses and the failings of humanity, and it's really a look at the violence and the inhumanity that regular, everyday people are capable of committing against their literal neighbors, especially when there are people in power who encourage that and enable that. So it's an excellent book. It's extremely well written. It's heartbreaking, and I really recommend it. Next up, I read The Lake by Banana Yoshimoto. So I first heard of Banana Yoshimoto over on Matthew Sharappa's channel. He talked about her in a couple of the videos that he did for Women in Translation Month, which I'm going to link down below, and he recommended The Lake in particular, and I liked this book. I finished it a few weeks ago, and I'm glad that I've had a little time to think about it and process it, because it was definitely one of those books that by the time I finished it, I wasn't quite sure what to think about it or what I felt about it. This is a story about a young man called Nakajima and a young woman called Chihiro, and they strike up a relationship with each other because their apartment buildings in Tokyo are adjacent to each other, and they start to see each other through their windows. And Chihiro's mother has just died, and Nakajima has a very mysterious and dark past that suggests some sort of trauma has happened to him that Chihiro doesn't fully understand. And I think the thing that surprised me the most about this book was the writing, which I think on the surface level comes off as very simplistic. It's very pared down, spare. It's told from the first person point of view of Chihiro, so when she's narrating, she uses a lot of sort of, I guess, maybe. So it feels very kind of uncertain, a little bit casual and informal and colloquial. But I think that the simple style of the writing kind of belies the emotional depth and the thoughts and the ideas that are in this book. And sometimes you'll be reading it and then just hit this sort of beautiful gem of a line that really hits you and makes you go, oh, wow, yes, that is what it's like to be a person and be alive. On page 141, everything in my life revolves around people playing at being something, but that's only because we have to be that way in order to get on with our lives. Just because people are playing doesn't mean their hearts aren't in it. Very simple, but it hits on something that taps into human experience that I think is really fantastic. Overall, though, I think that the reason I liked this book rather than loved it is that a few weeks out from reading it, I don't find the characters to be particularly memorable or the story to be especially memorable, and I think that what she's doing in terms of style is more interesting to me than emotionally resonant. Next up, I read BLUETS by Maggie Nelson, and this was recommended to me by my sweet friend Josh, who I contacted after my catastrophic experience reading Milk and Honey, and he is a poet, and so I was asking him for poetry recommendations for people like me who don't read too much poetry, and he said that this was super accessible and also really beautiful, and I would agree with him on both fronts. So this book is all about the color blue. And it's obviously about more than just the color blue, and it's partly about grief and loss and its different forms, and she talks about sort of the end of a relationship. And it's a book of poetry, but it's also history and literary criticism and theory and philosophy. And a lot of this book is her quoting other artists and writers and thinkers, which I found so interesting. And it's kind of an example of how art is about collective thought and collective memory, and how no art exists in a vacuum, and how all art and writing and thinking is in conversation with the whole history of those things. I just found it fascinating, and I thought that she blended disciplines in like such an interesting way. There are so many lines and passages in this book that are lovely and thoughtful, and that I marked up with a pencil and will return to whenever I do read poetry, like really good poetry that is complex and has a lot of things going on in it. I always feel like I'm missing something, or missing at least part of what's going on. It's always something that makes me wish I was still in college and had a discussion section to go to talk to other people about the book, because sometimes I read poetry and then I finish it and I don't really know how to process it or what to do with it. So does anyone else feel that way about poetry? I know that sometimes studying poetry in a school setting turns people off of poetry, but reading it on my own sometimes leaves me frustrated. Although I did really like this book, I just feel like there's stuff in here that I haven't fully penetrated yet. And lastly, I listened to SPQR, A History of Ancient Rome by Mary Beard. This book came out a couple of years ago and was a big nonfiction bestseller. It's accessible to anybody, I would say. That being said, I don't know that an 18-hour audiobook is the best way to learn about centuries worth of ancient Roman history. I think what I learned while listening to this book is that I am someone who, in order to remember information, needs to have a visual cue. So sometimes for me that's even remembering like a person's name written down in a book, or like what section of a book a certain passage was on. And I think hearing all of these names and dates and different people throughout the centuries of this history just kind of came into my brain and then went out pretty quickly. I don't think it was all a lost cause, because I think I have a slightly better idea of who, say, Cicero was, of Augustus and Octavian, and how Rome went from being a republic to an empire. But also, don't ask me to talk about any of those topics in detail, because I would not be able to. I can't really speak to how it compares to other histories of Rome, or how her argument holds up compared to other works about Rome. Her main argument is pretty basic, and it's why Roman history is still relevant to us today. I don't know how original her interpretations are compared to other writers' interpretations, but it definitely is a solid, comprehensive, accessible history of Rome. So if you're interested in that, I would say this is a good place to start. You would think that I would know a little bit more after 18 hours of listening to it, but I really do think it's a case of, it's me, not you, Mary Beard. Those are all the books that I read in the month of September. If you've read any of the books that I talked about here, if you have thoughts on them, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you next time, guys. Thanks for watching. Bye.